And down south of us in Venezuela, excuse me, there's some serious stuff going on. And a guy who used to do a lot of reporting on this is Greg Palast, our old buddy, and the investigative journalist. He's reported for everybody from Rolling Stone and the BBC to well, pretty much every place. GregPalast.com, you can find all this stuff. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast, and coming in from somewhere in the bowels of Europe, Greg Palast, welcome back to the program.
Okay, well, you can see by the Alps and the clock behind me that I'm in Switzerland, and with a new hat, so I'm kind of undercover.
Aha! Yes.
Yes.
It looks great.
So, but the issue today really is Venezuela.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you've given me this opportunity. You know, I covered Venezuela for the BBC, for Rolling Stone, and for The Guardian. And I know the president, I know the opposition, too. And what's going on here, which is not covered by the mainstream media, is a coup d'etat engineered by Donald Trump. Of course, he's not much of an engineer. The actual driver of that train is John Bolton, his neocon retread national security advisor. And basically, you've got a guy named Juan Guaido who has literally pronounced himself president, and Donald Trump has repronounced him president. He made that pronouncement, by the way, right after a phone call from Donald Trump saying, if you announce yourself as president, we know this, if you announce yourself as president, I'll recognize you as the president of a country where you've never even run for office. By the way, they're not claiming that the current government, which is a Chavista, that is Hugo Chavez's chosen successor, who won the last election, very close election. No one claimed he stole it, Carter Center or others. And this guy, Juan Guaido, a nice white guy who went to George Washington University, speaks English wonderfully. Our president, Mr. Trump, has literally declared he's president, and he's never run for anything. And if you really want to know what's behind this, I know that, Nate, if you could put up on the screen, let me show you a couple pictures that really explain it all. There are members of Congress who back this guy, Juan Guaido, the self-proclaimed, Trump-proclaimed president. And if you look at those Congress people, and the people on radio are just going to have to take our word for it. You know, you do trust Tom, and I hope you trust me. Basically, the congressional delegation that backs Juan Guaido, Trump's choice, is whiter than a Republican country club gathering. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the people that back Maduro, that is the people that are backing Hugo Chavez, the late Hugo Chavez's party, that's completely dark-skinned Congress people.
Yeah, and this, by the way, these are not just backers, as in, you know, people who show up at a Trump rally kind of thing. This is literally the entire, you know, all the members of Guaido's party in Congress are light-skinned, are European ancestry, and virtually all of them. And virtually all of the backers of Maduro are dark-skinned. They're either what he said he's, you know, I guess this is the Spanish language. He said he's part Negro, part Indio.
Yeah, Negro Indio is a term that Hugo Chavez used for me, meaning, by the way, not just meaning his heritage, that he's mestizo from black and Indian heritage, but that he looks black and he has Indian features. Right. And what we have here is basically a white supremacist coup d'etat. Now I know that this is Trump's dream for the United States. And you know what's amazing to me, Tom, is that the liberals in America, the Democratic Party leaders in America, when they look at I was at the Macon, Georgia Trump rally, and when they see the white supremacists yelling white supremacist nasty slogans, and they see that scary white white crowd that's trying to make sure that black people have no. In Georgia, we're trying to stop a black woman from becoming governor. They denounce that. They denounce those crowds. Yet in Venezuela, they're literally backing this minority white coup d'etat.
But Greg, or no, I shouldn't say but. I mean, you know, let's widen the frame a little bit. I've worked in Colombia. I've worked in Peru. I've worked in Mexico. I have been to Venezuela. In fact, Louise and I were there the day of the first military coup.
I remember.
But I've actually worked in a number of those countries, and one of the things that I noticed when I was down there was, and most of this was back in the 80s, but still, was that the power structure is very, very white. I mean, you even saw this, look at the last president of Mexico, Vicente Fox. He looks like he just stepped out of an ad for Spain, and the poverty, the poor people are almost always, indigenous people, the ancestors of indigenous people, or indigenous people who have interbred, I guess is the word. I don't know how to say it politely. Over the years with slaves, and enslaved people, and there's still, and also you've got, the direct descendants of enslaved people, but and so the reality is that up until Hugo Chavez was elected president in Venezuela, I don't think that there was a person who was a person of color who was ever the leader of Venezuela, was there?
Right. He was the Obama of Venezuela after 400 years of white rule. But in this case, remember, it's a white minority rule.
Right.
And that was broken by Chavez and now his successor, Maduro, and the white people don't like it. Now, the truth is that Donald Trump didn't decide on Guaido because he wants to bring his Make America White Again program to Venezuela. It's something underneath those white people and under those brown people, which is the world's largest reserve of oil. That is 4 times the reserve of Saudi Arabia. And John Bolton, the Trump's NSA chief, actually went on Fox News and said, the reason we are there, our number one concern, he actually said this on Fox News, is the oil. We've been talking to American oil companies. They are ready to take over Venezuela's oil. I kid you not. They're not even covering it up.
Right. No, I believe it's the Koch Industries that owns the refinery on the Gulf Coast that is the only refinery that's capable of refining this heavy crude that comes out of Venezuela. And now that that same refinery can also refine the heavy crap that comes down from Canada in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which is why they built the pipeline to that refinery. And there was a lot of people assuming that therefore they wouldn't need Venezuela's oil anymore.
Well, what was happening is that the Koch brothers were literally the captive customers. The number one customer of Venezuela was Koch Industries. Over half their oil went to Koch Industries and related companies. And so what happened is Venezuela was basically really charging the Koch brothers through the nose. So now, while they've been charging, the money's been collected by the American subsidiary of the Venezuelan state oil company called Citgo. You see those Citgo gas stations. Donald Trump has effectively taken over and seized Citgo and kept all the money. Because when the Kochs pay, they don't pay to Venezuela, even though it's Venezuela's oil, the people's oil. It's paid to basically the U.S. Treasury, or being held by the U.S. Treasury.
Paid to Citgo, and it's being seized by the U.S. Treasury. Yeah, I get it.
And which is pretty funny because, we keep talking about, this terrible socialist who seized the oil companies. Well, that's just what Trump has done.
Yeah, there you go. Greg, we only have about 2.5 minutes before we're going to hit a hard break that I can't do anything about, and I want to pursue this a little farther. The reality down in Venezuela right now is that they've got something like 100,000% inflation. It's just devastating everybody. And it appears, I've read a couple of pieces about this in the financial media, particularly the Financial Times, that the main thing, typically these kinds of hyperinflation happen when a vital or a critical commodity is not available, and so that price explodes and it drags everything else with it. We saw this in a small way in the United States after the Arab oil embargo, and apparently that vital commodity is U.S. dollars. That Venezuela had borrowed U.S. dollars had borrowed in things denominated in U.S. dollars very heavily, and now they can't pay that back, and that's what's killing their currency. To what extent is that the fault of the Chavez and Maduro government? To what extent do they own the dysfunction of their own economy?
I would say, I know Maduro, the president, I think he's over his head, no question, and I think he didn't realize what the United States could do to him, because here's what's happening. The entire economy of Venezuela is based on selling oil to the United States. That's the entire economy of Venezuela, okay, with some oil to China and Russia.
Right, and Cuba.
So now the United States is literally withholding all the money that's owed for that oil. Plus, there's an embargo. It's an act of war. In fact, the United Nations Rapporteur has said this siege is like a medieval siege. It's an act of war, and the UN rapporteurs who was sent there said this is causing starvation. There's no medicine because we are embargoing.
Yeah, 10% of the population has fled the country.
Yeah, and because they can't eat.
Right.
They have to get out. If you want to eat, if you want to survive, you got to go.
And now you got Marco Rubio and Donald Trump with this aid caravan via Colombia that's on their border that Maduro won't let into the country, which is, I think, shooting him. I think he's shooting himself in the foot here.
Well, there's no question. I mean, they showed up with some food with American flags on it for 5,000 families for 3 weeks. Okay, right. There are 15 million people who are hungry. About half of the people are facing starvation. Millions of people.
And if we just lifted the embargo, they could get fed.
If you lifted the embargo and you gave them their money, but you know where? By the way, you know where the money's going? The number one creditors are Goldman Sachs and Apollo Capital, which is Mr. Black's
right, one of the hedge fund billionaires
venture fund, and so the money's going to Goldman Sachs. And it's being held by Mnuchin, our Treasury Secretary, which he says he'll only give to the opposition, this white guy who proclaimed himself and Trump will proclaim president. He said they'll give him money if the Venezuelans make him president. It's literally, we're going to starve you unless you choose our white guy.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Greg Palast, investigative journalist, author, filmmaker. His most recent, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. GregPalast.com is the website. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast, Palast. Greg, thank you.